Welcome to episode number 3 of Courageous Conversations, where I highlight for you different South Asian practitioners in the world of yoga, wellness, and energy work. And today I'm delighted to bring back to this YouTube channel Yamini Bhatt, who has been a mentor of mine for many, many years. I think we counted more than a decade. Yamini, you've helped me through birthing YogaVision as a business, the passing of my mom, the birth of my child, the birth of this online version. So you've been with me through many, many transitions. And I thought now is the perfect time to come back to a conversation with you about being South Asian, being in the teachings of Kundalini Yoga and energy work, and to get your take on Kundalini Rising, Kundalini Yoga, and the difference between the two and how to navigate. So I'm delighted to have you here. It's an honor. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from, and how do you land here in this conversation?
Well, thank you so much for that beautiful intro, Salimah. Yes, we have been together probably on this journey for over a decade. And my journey began way back in 97 when I was a young mother of 2 children and wanted to be out of corporate world and into something more meaningful and something more fulfilling, which brought me to Kundalini Yoga, which brought me to Hatha Yoga and then Kundalini Yoga. And then off of Kundalini Yoga birthed something called spiritual response therapy. And I felt like I was on my way to something I didn't know what the destination was. So I landed progressively working on myself, helping others side by side with my personal and my spiritual growth into birthing a business that has been around since 2004 and just have had wonderful opportunities through my business, that online platform, teaching workshops, helping so many people walk a very similar path. A path of perhaps healing, transformation, journey into self-discovery, journey into more joy in one's life, and also just, accepting our path, a path that we've chosen to walk on. It has been very liberating, and I feel it's just so important for us to always come home to that place within us, no matter what we're doing out there. Work, raising families, healing ourselves, running businesses, doesn't matter. We still have to find a way back to ourselves. And I feel like that has been a growth opportunity personally and professionally to help others with.
And how do you see your heritage, your South Asian heritage, playing into that, or adding a nuance to that?
Well, that's a great question. When I was reflecting on this, probably many times in the past, as to how have I come here, and in terms of my own personal journey, it all began. I was born and raised in India until I was 17, and my dad was a physician. He's passed away, but he was a physician, and he really wanted me to be academically, successful. That was his vision. So I was sent to America as a student to go to school, finish my college, which I did in New York. And while I was in India, before I left for America, as life would have it, I was introduced to a teacher, a spiritual teacher, through my father, about age 13, 14. And he sort of became my guide into spirituality. He gifted me books. He gifted me with just simple processes, mantras and prayers and, things that we would normally do. I wouldn't say my birth family was very spiritual or religious. My mom was, obviously, but dad wasn't so much. And so I was split between mom and dad. I was was very much a studious person. So always in books, reading books, learning from books. And then mom would bring these other aspects of prayer and faith and, chanting every day, go, pray before you go to school, things like that. So I felt like I had that, those seeds planted in me. So when I came to America and I was on my own, definitely there was this intense longing for for spirituality. And my teacher had given me a small little pocketbook to carry with me, which is Bhagavad Gita. And I never read the whole book until I came to America. And because of that longing, so it really grounded me into this Eastern world of spirituality. And I was just immersed in it, in reading books and practicing on my own. And until I found yoga in 96, 97, and then began a whole journey of personal practice, of embodying, of, applying what I was learning. And it was just so fascinating in terms of transformation and healing that I was really discovering within myself. And simultaneously raising young family, I just needed that internal strength and support. I just thought that was just my beginning into something that I never really left. I never thought of leaving. I never gave it a second thought. It was just naturally birthing in me, and I allowed it, I guess.
Yes. I find it interesting, and we can probably spend a whole episode on the fact that all of this surfaced when you moved away from India and into the West. So we'll park that for another day. I think that's super fascinating. And, as a first generation in North America myself, there's lots of overlap, and we'll come back to that for sure. But today I really wanted to focus on, because you have this really interesting and powerful ability to use the language of energy, and to use a structure and a format for clearing energy, and also combined with Kundalini Yoga. And so those two pieces have allowed you and I personally to take good advantage of where we overlap, and where your skills in terms of clearing energy and helping me be more aware of energy really land today. I think you become more and more relevant as time goes on. It might have been far out there before, but now it's like right on topic. And so I wanted to present you with something that is a topic that's very present for people now, and that is, what is Kundalini Rising, and how does that differ from Kundalini Yoga, and how can we use Kundalini Yoga to navigate So I'll start here before I get too complicated in my question. What is Kundalini Rising to you from your perspective, and what is Kundalini Yoga?
So Kundalini Rising literally, to me, means rising in consciousness, rising in awareness. It's personal to each and every one of us, but we're coming out of our sort of stuckness, and we rise into more awareness, is when the energy is rising inside of us, consciousness is rising inside of us, allowing us to experience our own awareness of who we are in relation to, say, our issues and challenges, or our life itself. So Kundalini Rising, in a grand scheme of things, I would say rising in awareness. It's rise in your awareness. Kundalini Yoga, on the other hand, it's a systematic way to really bring up awareness using breath, using techniques in terms of hand positions, breath awareness, using spinal movements, mantras, which are sound currents that have a huge impact on our nervous system as well as our cellular structure. So Kundalini Yoga facilitates the awareness that we're needing to rise in to deal with life in general. So to me, they're two separate things. Kundalini Yoga is an amazing way, very systematic, safe way to discover not only your internal makeup, but become aware of your truth in terms of who you are, how you relate to life, and become more aware about your life journey just in general. And then as you practice more Kundalini Yoga through different meditation tools and different breath work, you're initiating something inside of you that is true to you, right?
Right. So it's, in a way, it is like personally taking on the challenge, or the taking on that awareness. So that rising awareness ends or allows us to step into different kinds of practices. Oh, I'm feeling more aware of something needs to clear, or something, I need to move through this particular challenge. Let me go seeking. And that, for many people, ends up here on this channel, YogaVision Online. And in that discovery, there is, oh, I can do these practices. They help me feel more connected, more alive, more myself. I can move through trauma. I can move through depression, anxiety, all of those things. And I agree with you. I think there's a building wave of energy around, how can I find natural ways to step myself through this stuff? And then can you comment on the people who have who say they've had scary experiences with Kundalini? And I think that there's something very powerful that happens when we step into our own consciousness and go seeking. So part of that rising, part of that energy is to start to look for practices, look for information, look for something that helps to expand that small little seed that's starting to rise or awaken. And so oftentimes people come here, YogaVision Online, because these are the practices that can actually systematically, like you mentioned, start to develop that consciousness. And so we take it on for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I think, I'm a big fan. You're a big fan. There's no secret there. But talk to us about the experiences that people have that sound scary, or that sound negative, or that are associated with evil.
All these years that I have experienced healing modalities. This is in general, and then I'll come to your specific question in terms of Kundalini Yoga. But in general, the rule of thumb is that when we take ownership and responsibility for our own healing, and we come to practices like Kundalini Yoga or other energy healing modalities, the first place where it's going to impact us is to unravel, unfold our truth of what we have been either understanding, misperceiving. Where is the truth? Where is our truth? And in the process, it may feel scary, because precisely what we do not want to confront within us is going to be presented to us through our breath work, perhaps, if we're practicing Kundalini Yoga or other form of energy work. We will be facing that particular, perhaps, scenario. And, one of my teachers had always said that if you're going to approach healing, you need to take full ownership. So 100% responsibility, personal responsibility, equals 100% power. So when we're seeking healing, we're seeking self-empowerment. We are wanting to rise above our suffering, our challenges, and therefore our inner being is going to present us with perhaps what's scary for us to look at, what's very difficult for us to confront. And yet, that is precisely where we need to be in our own way to walk through that path. It is called hero's journey. It is called, coming out on the other side. We have to begin somewhere. So the entry oftentimes is right where we don't want to be. So when someone comes to practice Kundalini Yoga, one of the greatest things that I really appreciate about Kundalini Yoga is that you're in charge of your own breath, you're in charge of your own body, you're in charge of everything that is happening in this instrument, right? So you're taking 100% ownership and responsibility for what is emerging or what is being, shown to you. So when something feels scary, as we have, say, gone through a meditation and we're experiencing something negative instead of a outcome that we went in with, if a meditation is to overcome, say, depression, and we feel all anxious coming out on the other side, it's not necessarily a scary thing. It's something to reflect on, something to pay attention to, because it is being shown to you that this is your next step to move through it. And sometimes just being consistent with practices, being consistent with our own inner journey allows us to just walk through that with courage and self-compassion and just self-reflection and understanding of our process. So when something feels scary, I will say that it's a very common thing that happens. It doesn't necessarily mean, if it doesn't happen, that, oh, the Kundalini is not rising. There's so much misperception there. As I said earlier, Kundalini Rising is about awareness rising. So if something is being confronted, now you have just raised your awareness. Yes, it's going to be, that's the next thing that's going to unfold. You're going to become aware of something that you had no idea was there. So is that really something to be afraid of? Or is that something to perhaps gain more courage and confidence and faith within ourselves to walk through it? If we are on a path of healing, obviously that would be the next step, is let me walk through this.
Right. So the only way to the other side is through
trust. Yeah.
Yes, I concur with what you're saying. I think that there's elements of if you take a physical practice as a symbol, so sometimes it's challenging to do frog pose, for example, and then the first time we do frog pose is challenging, and then the more we do it, the more we build the muscle memory and the willingness, and like, oh, look what I can do now. Is the same thing spiritually, mentally, emotionally, that comes along with the practice. That's how I like to look at it, is that we're developing.
Energetics too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's your thought on spontaneous Kundalini rising that feels negative? I think that within the practice, there's a structure that helps it feel contained and safe. And there are teachers like you and me who are there waiting in the wings to answer questions and to be a source of knowledge and experience. But what do you say to people who are experiencing it without the practice as a background? So something, there's a glance across the room and there's a sense that it might be Kundalini rising, or there's an incident that creates a spontaneous response. What is your take on that?
Well, from my own experience, I'll say this. When things happen spontaneously, our mind has a way to define it. in a specific way. So how we understand personally what Kundalini Rising is, we're going to taint our experience based on that definition. That doesn't necessarily always mean that that was an effect of Kundalini Rising. That's number one. Like, again, if you're rising in consciousness or awareness, it can be scary because now you're up against, your own clarity and truth being presented to you. And there are so many negative connotations around Kundalini energy. Well, first thing we need to understand is that Kundalini energy is spiritual energy. It is within each and every one of us. It is perhaps operating at a minute level for some people, and for some people, it may be activated in a very systematic way. So when something happens suddenly, it's never like, oh, it was dormant, and all of a sudden you're on scale 10 with your Kundalini rising. I've never really seen that necessarily happen. But I will say this, that I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but it can't always be defined as Kundalini rising. Because here's the thing, Kundalini rising, in one sense, is a spiritual experience. And we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. So a human experience of perhaps a trauma, which are our human experiences. Can that activate your spiritual energy that's dormant? Yeah, it absolutely can. Can it be scary? Maybe, yeah, it could be scary, right? But at the same time, if all of that is a spiritual experience in terms of, not judging it good or bad, right or wrong, trauma is real to each and every one of us. It stays within our body, in our cellular structure. It stays within our brain. We compartmentalize our traumas in a very specific way. It could even become part of our DNA at some point. So none of that is necessarily wrong. But when we associate anything with Kundalini rising, I will say that the effect of that is not going to be same as some psychological or psychotic experience that someone might be having due to trauma. There is a great difference in both. And it would be really difficult to help someone navigate without working with them one-on-one per se, or understanding their situation or their actual experience. I wouldn't jump to defining that as a Kundalini rising just because of what we might have read or what we might have heard.
I hear you. Yeah, and I think that that's a very important distinction is spiritual energy is connected to mental, emotional, genetic, generational experiences, as is mental health. And so there is that continuum that we have to consider, and one may not be the same as the other.
Yeah.
And
inner experience is different, for sure. One is more fear-based. The other one is more perhaps gentle, or there is an inner knowing, because it is your energy. It is your spiritual connection. Mm-hmm. It's within each and every one of us. We're not ever not spiritual.
Right. And do you think part of this is a culture clash between Eastern philosophy and ethos and a Western perspective on mental health?
Most definitely. Most definitely. There is a vast difference in terms of not having enough understanding.
Right.
Not having enough, enough clarity, enough perhaps scientific research. I mean, there is a lot of research being done on meditation, on Kundalini energy, or what we define as a Kundalini energy being from a yogic perspective, and the mental health issues and challenges that are rising. From my perspective, and not so much from yoga perspective, but from energetic perspective, from working with clients in terms of helping them heal at a deeper level, at a soul level, I will say that sometimes that is a doorway into greater healing, spiritual healing that we're seeking, our soul is seeking, and there are ways to work with it. Science and medical industry hasn't really gotten there, but we know that from yogic traditions and from yogic practices, how could all this be created unless there was a way of all the teachers and masters who really had visions and understanding of how the psychology and how the physiology of our human body emotionally and mentally and spiritually was connected, with the cosmos, with the universe, with so much that we don't take into consideration, right?
So true. Yes, and I think even the language, the way it's structured, we have a different word for body, a different word for mind, a different word for emotions, different words for spirituality. And almost all ancient wisdom traditions see it as a holistic experience, not one versus the other or one separated from the other. And so, so in this conversation, we're transcending language, we're transcending culture, transcending time, as we always do in these kind of in a spiritual realm, is to look at what are the unending truths, what are the truths that are there beyond time and space. And I think one of the things that you touched on that's really important is how do we learn to embrace consciousness for ourselves? Because I feel very much that consciousness in this Kundalini Yoga way of defining it is the rise of the feminine. And also, I think it's actually more dangerous to not be conscious, to not be invested in our greater awareness, to not go seeking for guidance, experiences, practices that allow more of approach than just two-dimensional or three-dimensional. What else is out there?
Mm-hmm. I personally believe that we need guidance because there is so much out there. There's so much out there. And yes, it's a very common thing that we do, that we search for different ways to support ourselves. And those who are really looking for guidance, genuine guidance and understanding of their true nature, I really honestly feel it has to come to, we have to start from this, from me, from I, where am I in my relation to my life or my issues, my challenges? Where am I? Like, what's happening with me here? There is that awakening, right? We call that awakening. It has to happen in a true sense, not just out of curiosity, not just out of, oh, let me check this out, let me check that out, not from that place, but from a place of genuine desire to help myself. That's the first step, in my opinion, that we all need to get to. And life is presenting us with many opportunities where we're saying, this is not working, that's not working. I have to, and we go out in search for what might be helpful to me. So that's a great place to start. And once we start that journey, this is my firm conviction that once we come from that place, we have support system, we have guidance. Our inner guidance, our higher self allows us to move into that next step. And a next step and takes us in a direction. Perhaps it can come from a book, or talking to a friend, or watching a YouTube video, or listening to a podcast, but our guidance comes to us. This to me is very important in terms of what's unfolding out there, because there is a lot out there and it's very easy to get lost in it. And before you know it, you start to have your own narrative about, your own self-diagnose of what's happening, what's not happening, what I should do, what I shouldn't do. I feel that Kundalini Yoga is one of the greatest ways that we can find our center. We can find our connection. We can find our ability to trust ourselves. And as we move forward, with how the world is moving, we can't depend on our mind all the time. We're going to have to find what is called a neutral mind in Kundalini Yoga, but really we have to access our own guidance and our own intuition. So how do we know something that comes from our intuition, our guidance, or our mind? How do we know the difference? We have to discover that for ourselves. And practices like Kundalini Yoga meditations, breath work. Well, I speak of Kundalini Yoga quite a bit because not only have I been a teacher and a practitioner, lifetime practitioner of that, I can't see without that, doing the healing and energy work and transformational work that I do for myself and others, helping others do it, because both have to connect. We can't just be doing energy work, and not have it grounded and show up in our life. So Kundalini Yoga is a practical, simple, efficient way, very, especially for busy lives. It's a very efficient and practical way to center ourselves, to connect to our guidance, and then to project in terms of how I want to move through my life, or that day, or a particular challenge.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your perspective. I think it's super valuable. How do people get a hold of you if they're looking to do spiritual response therapy?
Yeah, so spiritual response therapy is the core work that I do. I incorporate Eastern, Western, practices, because the focus is on a person. The best way to get hold of me is through my website, and that is rhythm.com, RIDDHAM.com.
I'll put that link below into the description box.
Yeah, and people can find me and the work that I do through that website.
Thank you, Yamini. And on behalf of everyone at YogaVision, I'd like to thank you for your time. And if you're looking for more work with YogaVision, of course, here, starting with the practices of Kundalini Yoga, our awesome starting spot. The next step is to discover Kundalini Yoga teacher training, a full year online where we dive into topics like this on a regular basis in the context of community, in the context of mentorship and guidance, and to really use these tools in order to flourish and to know yourself and to know your center. Kundalini Yoga is a therapy unto itself, and it's self-initiated. And so taking that time to invest in your well-being over the course of a year gives you back 10 years of change, transformation, leadership in your own right. So between the two of us, we got you covered. Thank you again, Yamini, for your time and your energy today, for sharing your wisdom about Kundalini Rising. I think it's all very important as we move forward into times that none of us have ever contemplated before. So thank you again. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's my pleasure, Salimah. Always a pleasure.
Lots of